Rainwater dripped from broken pipes above the alley, mixing with the smell of rotting food and rusted metal. The night was heavy, silent except for the sound of claws scraping against the ground. A girl crouched in the shadows, her body thin, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She was not human. Her skin had a pale gray shade stretched tight over her bones, and her hair was tangled with dirt. Hunger had carved sharp lines across her face. In front of her lay a torn piece of bread half soaked in mud, but she was not alone. A wild dog, ribs sticking out, fur patchy and wet, growled at her from the other side. Its teeth shone as it bared, its mouth ready to fight for the same scrap. The girl hissed, her hands shaking. She had not eaten for 3 days. Her stomach ached like knives inside her. She reached forward, but the dog leaped. Their bodies collided in the wet dirt. Teeth sank into her arm. She screamed but refused to let go. With her other hand, she clawed at the dog's neck. Blood mixed with rain. The bread lay between them, trampled but still the only food in sight. Passers-by walked near the alley. Some glanced and then turned away. Some laughed cruelly. "Look at the alien beast fighting a mutt for food," one voice sneered. Another replied, "Pathetic. Better to let them tear each other apart." But the girl did not care about the voices. She only cared about survival. The dog bit harder, pain shot through her arm. Her strength was fading, yet she pushed on. She scratched its eye and the animal yelped, pulling back. That single second gave her enough time to grab the bread and clutch it to her chest. Her victory lasted only a moment. The dog snarled again and leaped forward, knocking her against the wall. The bread slipped from her hands. She tried to reach it again, but her wounded arm was weak. She gasped, her vision blurring. She thought this was the end. Then, footsteps echoed in the alley. A tall figure stopped at the entrance. A man-human? His jacket was torn from long work hours, his boots covered in dust. He looked like an ordinary worker returning home late, but his eyes locked on the scene before him. An alien girl bleeding in the dirt, a hungry dog circling her, and a piece of bread lying between them. For a second he froze. His mind told him to walk away like everyone else had. This was not his problem. But something in his chest refused. "Hey!" he shouted. His voice cut through the night. The dog snarled but hesitated. The man stepped forward, picking up a loose pipe from the ground. He waved it at the dog. The animal barked, then slowly backed away into the dark, growling until it disappeared into the shadows. The girl pressed her back against the wall, clutching her bleeding arm. Her eyes glowed with fear and suspicion. She expected him to strike her, to laugh at her, maybe even to steal the bread. Her entire life had taught her never to trust, but the man knelt beside her instead. His hands were rough, his face tired, but his movements were gentle. He tore a piece of cloth from his own sleeve and pressed it against her wound. Blood soaked the fabric instantly. She winced and tried to pull away, but his grip was firm, steady, not cruel. "Hold still," he said softly. "You'll bleed more if you fight me." The girl's chest rose and fell quickly. She didn't understand all his words, but his tone carried no threat, only calm. She watched his face closely, waiting for the trick, the cruelty, but it didn't come. When the bleeding slowed, he sighed. "That's better." Then, he reached into a small bag on his belt. He pulled out a wrapped piece of bread and half a flask of soup. The smell made the girl's mouth water instantly. Her stomach growled so loud that it embarrassed her. She looked at him with wide eyes. He placed the food on the ground between them, not in her hands, not forced, just placed gently. Then he leaned back, giving her space. Her fingers trembled as she reached out. At first she only touched the bread as if it might vanish. Then she tore into it with sharp teeth, devouring it so fast she almost choked. Tears stung her eyes. Warm food, real food, after so many nights of nothing but garbage. The man watched quietly. He did not rush her, did not demand thanks. His expression was unreadable, yet there was a shadow of sadness there. Sadness for what? She had become, for what she had suffered. The girl glanced at him once, just once, while chewing. Her gaze was full of confusion, fear, and something else. Something fragile. A spark that maybe, just maybe, This human was different. The alley was quiet again, but the story had only just begun. The night was still heavy with silence, only broken by the sound of the girl chewing. She ate as if the food would vanish if she slowed down. Her hands shook with every bite, pieces of bread falling into the dirt. She scooped them up quickly, unwilling to waste even crumbs. The human sat a little distance away, his back against the damp wall. His eyes studied her quietly. Her arm still bled under the cloth he had tied. The wound was ugly, swollen from the dog's teeth. Each time she moved, pain shot through her, but she didn't stop eating. Hunger was stronger than pain. When the bread was gone, she licked her fingers. Then she clutched the empty flask of soup, tilting it until the last drop touched her lips. For a long moment she sat frozen, her chest rising and falling. Her glowing eyes flicked toward the human, confused. No one had ever given her food without asking something in return. No one had ever touched her wounds without cruelty. She narrowed, her eyes suspiciously, waiting for him to demand payment, waiting for him to take the last piece of strength she had. But he only asked, "Does it hurt?" She blinked, not understanding all his words. But she caught the tone. He was asking about her arm. She hissed low, pulling the wounded limb closer. Her kind had learned long ago that when humans touched, it was to hurt. He didn't push. Instead, he opened his bag again, pulling out a small roll of clean bandages. They were not much, probably meant for his own work injuries, yet he unwrapped them carefully. His hands moved slow so she could see he meant no harm. The girl growled softly when he reached, but hunger had weakened her. She lacked the strength to fight. The man gently peeled away the soaked cloth he had tied before. The smell of blood mixed with rain made him frown. "This will sting," he whispered. Though he doubted she understood, he poured clean water from his flask over the wound. She gasped, baring her teeth in pain. Her body shook, and her claws scratched the wall behind her, but he kept steady. His grip was firm, not violent. The water carried away dirt and blood, leaving the raw bite open to air. He worked with focus, wrapping the wound carefully. He tied the bandage snug but not too tight. When he was done, he leaned back and wiped his hands. The girl stared at her arm. Her breathing slowed, the bleeding had stopped. The pain was still there, but it no longer throbbed as wildly as before. For the first time, she whispered something. Her voice was raspy, broken but filled with meaning. She said a word in her language that meant why. The human tilted his head, not understanding. Still, he caught her eyes and answered softly, "Because you needed help." She studied his face. His skin was rough, his eyes tired, his jacket patched more than once. He was no rich man, no powerful leader, just a worker. Yet he had shared his food, his water, and his bandages. The girl's chest tightened. She had been beaten, kicked, and thrown aside like trash by others. Yet this man had chosen to help. Her instincts screamed to distrust, but her hunger and her wound whispered something else, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The human stood slowly. He reached into his bag once more and pulled out a small packet. Inside were 2 more slices of bread. He placed them near her. She looked at the food, then back at him. Suspicion burned in her eyes. She bared her teeth, hissing as if warning him not to come closer. He didn't. He simply placed the bread and stepped back. Then he sat again quietly, letting her decide. Minutes passed. The rain softened, dripping slowly from the rooftops. Finally, the girl snatched the bread, tearing into it. But this time she ate slower, glancing up between bites. Her gaze kept landing on him, trying to read his intention. The human didn't stare back. He looked out toward the alley entrance, watching the empty street as if guarding her while she ate. That simple act made her throat tighten. Her kind had always been prey, always hiding from shadows. But here, for one fragile night, she felt shielded. When she finished, exhaustion hit her body. She leaned against the wall, her eyelids heavy, but her claws still gripped the edge of the blanket he had placed over her shoulders. She didn't let it slip. It was warm, soft compared to the cold air. The man spoke again, his voice steady. "Rest. You're safe for now. She didn't know the words, but she caught the tone. For the first time in years, her body allowed itself to relax. Her head tilted to the side, eyes closing slowly. She drifted into sleep, still holding the breadcrumbs in her hand, as if afraid they would be stolen. The human sighed, leaning his head back. He had no plan, no reason why he had done this. But as he watched the wounded alien girl breathing softly beside him, something inside told him that walking away had never been an option. Above them, lightning flashed far away. The galaxy was vast and cruel, but in this small corner, one act of kindness had lit a spark that neither of them understood yet. Morning light broke through the clouds. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet. Small puddles shone under the pale sun. The human stretched his tired arms and looked at the girl. She was awake, her glowing eyes darting from shadow to shadow. Her body was tense, ready to flee. She still clutched the last crumbs of bread in her hand as if they were treasure. The bandage on her arm was stained but holding. Her stomach was no longer empty, but her heart was still full of fear. When he stood, she flinched, pressing herself. Against the wall, her claws lifted slightly, not to attack but to defend. The human raised both his hands slowly. "Easy," he said in a calm tone. She did not understand his words, but his soft voice stopped her from running. He picked up his bag and gestured toward the street. His meaning was clear. "Come with me." The girl narrowed her eyes. Her instincts told her not to trust. Every time she had trusted before, it ended in pain. Humans had mocked her, beaten her, thrown her aside. Why would this one be different? Still, her legs shook from weakness. She knew she couldn't survive alone much longer. After a long pause, she followed, keeping a few steps behind. The streets were busier now. Workers hurried past, machines hummed, and shopkeepers opened their doors. People noticed them quickly. One human worker walking with a thin alien girl in rags. Whispers rose in the air. "Look at that," someone muttered. He picked up a stray. "She's dangerous," another voice said. "Those creatures bite. Don't let her near your children." A group of men laughed openly. Maybe he bought her cheap. Who else would care for that thing? The girl's ears twitched. She didn't know every word, but she understood enough. Their mocking tone cut her like a knife. Her chest tightened, her claws curled. She lowered her head, ashamed. The human heard the words too. His jaw tightened, but he kept walking. He didn't shout back, didn't argue, but the way his shoulders stiffened showed the anger he carried. He stopped at a small corner shop and bought some bread with the few coins he had left. The shopkeeper frowned at the girl, refusing to meet her eyes. He placed the bread on the counter quickly, as if afraid she might touch it. The girl noticed and hissed low in her throat. The human gently took the bread, broke it into pieces, and handed some to her. She hesitated, staring at him, waiting for the trick. But when he pressed it softly into her palm, she took it. Her stomach growled, and she ate slowly this time, her eyes never leaving his face. After they left the shop, she spoke a few broken words in her own tongue. Her voice was low, almost like a growl. He didn't understand the language, but he caught one word repeated again and again. "Why?" He knelt down in front of her, meeting her glowing eyes. "Because no one else will," he said softly. She didn't understand the sentence, but she saw the warmth in his eyes. It confused. Her kind had been taught humans were selfish, cruel, yet here was one who gave when he had so little. They walked further. The girl followed him like a shadow, but her mind was full of doubt. What if this was only temporary? What if he planned to sell her later like the others had done? Her memories stabbed her with sharp pain. She remembered chains around her wrists, the sound of laughter as she begged for water, the sting of whips, and the cold nights where she was left outside like an animal. Every step with him felt like stepping closer to another betrayal. Yet something strange stirred in her chest. When she touched the bandage on her arm, when she tasted the bread he had given, the fear inside her shifted. For the first time, distrust and hope were fighting in her heart. As they turned a corner, two children pointed at her. One whispered, "Monster." The other laughed, throwing a stone that hit the ground near her feet. She snarled, baring her teeth. The children screamed and ran. The human sighed deeply. He placed his hand on her shoulder, lightly, carefully. She stiffened, but this time she didn't pull away. His touch was steady, reassuring. She met his gaze again, still full of questions. He spoke gently. "They don't understand." His words meant nothing to her ears, but his calm tone settled her heart. That night, they found shelter in an old warehouse. He laid out a blanket and gave her a corner to rest. She curled up, holding the blanket tight. Her eyes stayed open, watching him. He ate quietly, leaving most of the food untouched so she could have more, the girl whispered to herself in her own tongue. Words that meant he is strange, he is dangerous. But not like the others. Her eyelids grew heavy, but her distrust kept her awake. She stared at him for a long time until her body finally gave in. Even in sleep, her claws gripped the blanket tightly, afraid it would be taken. The human lay, nearby, staring at the ceiling. He could still hear the whispers of the people in the street. But he didn't care. Let them talk. He had made his choice. He would not abandon her. In the silence of the warehouse, the girl stirred in her sleep, murmuring a word in her broken voice. It was not her own language this time, but one of his, the first word she had learned from him. "Safe," she whispered. Then she drifted deeper into sleep, unaware of the storm that was already gathering beyond the city. The warehouse was quiet, except for the soft sound of dripping water. The human sat near a small lantern, fixing his old boots. His hands were rough, his shoulders heavy with tiredness, but his eyes kept drifting toward the alien girl sleeping in the corner. She stirred in her sleep, twisting in the blanket. Her claws gripped the fabric tightly as if she feared someone would steal it. Sweat glistened on her pale gray skin. Her face was tense, trapped in a dream she couldn't escape. Suddenly she cried out in her own tongue. Her voice was sharp, filled with terror. The human rushed over, kneeling beside her. She jerked awake, her glowing eyes wide. Her chest rose and fell quickly. She looked around wildly, then fixed on him, confused, afraid. "It's okay," he whispered softly. His words meant little to her, but his tone calmed her shaking breath. Slowly, she relaxed. Pressing the blanket against her chest, for a long moment she just stared at him. Then with a trembling voice she spoke. Her words were broken, mixed with fragments of his language and her own. She struggled, but he listened carefully. Through gestures and half-understood phrases, he began to piece together her story. She had not always been a scavenger in dirty alleys. Once she had lived with her people. Her father had been strong, her mother kind. They had taught her how to hunt, how to sing in the night when stars glowed above. Her voice cracked as she described the songs, but everything changed when slavers came. Ships with iron wings had landed near their village. Men in black armor stormed their homes. They called her people beasts. They laughed as they set fire to the houses. She remembered the screams, the smoke, the chains. Her voice trembled as she mimed the shackles. Her thin wrists lifted as if she could still feel the weight. She hissed when she spoke of the whip. Her back arched as though pain still burned there. The human's fists clenched, his jaw tightened. He didn't interrupt. He let her pour the shadows of her past into the air. She told him how they forced her to fight other children for scraps of food. If she lost, she starved. If she won, she ate, but only enough to keep her alive. They called her weak, broken, useless. Finally, when she grew too thin to entertain them, they threw her out like garbage. Her glowing eyes dimmed as she whispered the last part. She had wandered from world to world, hiding in alleys, stealing from markets, fighting dogs and rats just to stay alive. Every night she dreamed of her family, and every morning she woke. Up alone, the human swallowed hard. His chest burned with anger, not at her, but at the cruelty of the galaxy, at the people who had turned a young girl into a creature of fear and hunger. He wanted to speak, to promise her something better, but he knew words alone would not heal wounds carved so deep. He placed a hand gently on her bandaged arm. She stiffened at first, then slowly relaxed. He didn't push further. He just sat, with her in silence, letting her know she wasn't alone. The lantern flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. For the first time, she didn't pull away when he sat close. She looked at him with eyes full of questions. Why did this man, who had nothing, choose to share with her? Why did he care when no one else had? Her throat tightened. A sound escaped her lips. Not quite a word. Not quite a sob. It was raw, fragile. The sound of someone who had forgotten what kindness felt like. The human looked at her, his eyes steady. He didn't say "I understand" because he didn't. He hadn't lived her pain, but he could give her something no one else had offered. Protection. He spoke slowly, choosing simple words she might catch. No chains. Not again. Her eyes widened. She repeated softly, stumbling over the words. No. Chains? He nodded. His voice was firm. Not while I live. For the first time, her lips curved into something faint, almost a smile. It was weak, broken, but it was real. The first flicker of trust, but outside the warehouse, unseen in the darkness, shadows moved. Two figures in dark cloaks whispered to each other. They had followed the trail, searching for the runaway girl. Their eyes gleamed as they spotted the faint light inside. The slavers hadn't forgotten her. They had come to take back what they believed was theirs. Inside, the girl rested at last, her head leaning against the human shoulder. She didn't know the danger creeping closer. She only knew that for the first time in years she felt safe. The human kept watch, his pipe resting near his hand. His instincts told him this peace wouldn't last, but he didn't care. He had already made his choice. If the galaxy wanted to chain her again, it would have to go through him first. The morning sun broke through the warehouse windows. Its light painted long golden lines across the dusty floor. The human sat by the doorway, sharpening a small tool from his work bag. His eyes were tired, but his mind was alert. He had spent most of the night listening to every sound outside. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind. The alien girl stirred under the blanket. Her glowing eyes opened slowly. She blinked at the sunlight, as if it were something foreign. For her, mornings had never been safe. Daylight usually meant hiding, running, or being chased away. But here the light felt softer. The human noticed her watching him. He raised his hand and gave a small nod, his way of saying, "Good morning." She tilted her head, confused. He repeated the gesture, slower this time, and then pointed to the sun outside. "Morning," he said. She frowned, her lips forming the sound carefully. "Ning?" He smiled. "Yes, morning." Her chest rose and fell. She repeated the word again, this time a little clearer. It was a small victory, but in her eyes it looked like a mountain climbed. He opened his bag and took out the last piece of bread. He broke it in half and handed one piece to her. She stared at it for a long moment. Her claws twitched. She half expected him to snatch it back or laugh at her hunger, but when he pressed it gently into her hand, she held it close and ate slowly, savoring every bite. After they ate, he pulled a small piece of paper and a dull pencil from his pocket. It was something he used to note his work hours. He placed it on the ground between them and began drawing simple shapes: a circle, a square, a line. Then he pointed at them, speaking the words. "Circle," he said. She tilted her head, watching carefully. Her glowing eyes followed the pencil. She reached out hesitantly and traced the circle with her claw. "Klee," she whispered. He nodded, pleased. He drew a rough picture of bread and pointed. "Food." Her ears twitched. She looked at the drawing, then at the crumbs still on her palm. "Food," she repeated, stronger this time. The human chuckled softly. The sound was warm, not mocking. It startled her at first, but when she realized he wasn't laughing at her, something inside her chest loosened. The lesson continued, word by word. She struggled, stumbled, but each time he encouraged her with a nod or a smile. For someone who had been treated as worthless, every small success felt like a miracle. At one point, he drew a simple figure: 2 arms, 2 legs, and a round head. Then he pointed to himself. "Human," he said. She blinked, studying the drawing. Her claws tapped the paper. Then she pointed to herself, struggling to form the word of her kind in his language. It came out broken, but he nodded anyway, repeating it back as best as he could. Her eyes widened slightly at the effort he made to say her word. It was then, in that fragile silence, that her lips curved upward. The corners of her mouth lifted in something faint but undeniable. Her first smile, it was small, shy, and uncertain, but to the human, it was brighter than the morning sun. His chest warmed at the sight. He had seen her fight dogs, bleed, and hiss with fear. But this was different. This was a piece of her true self breaking free from the shadows. She quickly looked away, embarrassed, as if smiling was forbidden. Her people had beaten the softness out of her long ago, yet she couldn't stop it. The smile stayed even as she tried to hide it. The human didn't speak. He didn't make it heavier than it was. He simply gave a gentle nod, as if to say, "It's okay. You're allowed." For a few hours, the warehouse felt like a small school, paper covered with messy drawings and words. A young alien girl whispering human language, a tired worker patiently teaching. But outside, the city whispered too, not with kindness, but with malice. Word had begun to spread that a human was sheltering an alien girl. Some said he was foolish, others said he was dangerous for hiding her. The wrong ears were already listening. As the day stretched on, the girl dozed against the wall. The human sat nearby, keeping watch. His hand rested on the pipe he carried. His mind knew the world would not leave them alone. But when he looked at her faint smile, he decided it didn't matter. For now, she had food in her stomach, warmth on her shoulders, and a word in her heart she hadn't known for years: safe. In the shadows beyond the street, cloaked figures moved again, their eyes scanning, their voices low. The slavers were closing in, ready to reclaim what they had lost. Inside the warehouse, the girl whispered one last word before sleep took her. It was not from his language but from hers, a word that meant hope. The human didn't understand it, but he understood the sound, and in that fragile moment, hope was enough. The night air was heavy, carrying the smell of smoke and oil from the city. Inside the warehouse, the girl slept curled in the blanket, her bandaged arm pressed close to her chest. The human sat awake, his back against the wall, his eyes fixed on the doorway. His hand rested on the rusted pipe lying across his lap. He could not sleep. He felt it in his bones. Danger was coming, and he was right. 2 shadows moved outside, cloaked figures with sharp eyes. They whispered to each other, voices like knives. "She's inside," one said. "The master will reward us well when we bring her back." The other chuckled. "She won't fight long, she never does." The door creaked open slowly. A boot stepped across the threshold. The human's eyes narrowed, his grip tightened on the pipe. He didn't move yet, waiting, watching. The girl stirred. Sensing something wrong, her glowing eyes opened. She sat up quickly, ears twitching. She saw the figures entering and froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Her claws shook. She whispered one word, almost a whimper: "Slavers." Her body shrank back against the wall, every memory of chains and whips crashing back into her mind. Her chest rose and fell in panic. The human stepped in front of her, blocking her from sight, his shoulders squared. His voice came low, steady. "You're not taking her." The intruders laughed. Their teeth flashed in the dim light. One pulled out a chain, the metal clinking as it uncoiled. "Step aside, human. She belongs to us. She is property." The girl whimpered at the sound of chains. She wanted to run, but her legs refused to move. Her heart screamed, "Not again, not again." But the human didn't move. His eyes burned with quiet fire. "She's not property. She's not yours," he said. His voice was calm, but his hand gripped the pipe so tight his knuckles turned white. The taller slaver sneered. "You'll die for her? Foolish, we'll take her and sell you too. Maybe you'll fetch a few coins as a broken laborer." They rushed forward, The human swung the pipe. The first strike cracked against a slaver's arm. The man cursed, dropping the chain. The other lunged with a knife. The human ducked, the blade slicing across his jacket but missing flesh. The fight was raw, brutal. The pipe slammed against bone. The knife scraped against steel. Sparks flew when metal hit the ground. The girl watched, trembling. Her claws dug into the floor. She wanted to help, but fear chained her. One slaver grabbed the human's arm, twisting hard. The knife flashed, cutting shallow across his skin. Blood dripped, but the human gritted his teeth, swinging the pipe upward into the man's jaw. The crack echoed in the warehouse. The slaver fell back with a groan. The second charged again, rage in his eyes. He tackled the human to the ground. The knife hovered inches from his throat. The girl gasped. Her body shook. Memories of her past screamed at her to stay still, to hide. But something inside her broke. She let out a sharp cry. Her claws slashed across the attacker's back. He roared in pain, twisting away. The human seized the moment. Slamming the pipe into his ribs, the man collapsed with a grunt. Breathing hard, the human pushed himself up. His jacket torn, his arm bleeding, but his eyes were steady. He stood over the fallen men, gripping the pipe like a sword. The slavers groaned on the floor, spitting blood. "This isn't over," one hissed. "She belongs to us. The master will come, and you'll both regret this." The human raised the pipe higher, ready to strike again, but the girl's weak voice stopped him. "No. No kill," she whispered. Her glowing eyes stared at him, pleading. "She didn't want more blood, not tonight." He hesitated, then lowered the pipe. His chest heaved. His gaze locked on the slavers. "Get out," he growled. His tone carried a threat sharper than any blade. The men crawled out, limping into the night. Their eyes promised revenge, but for now they were gone. Silence filled the warehouse, broken only by heavy breaths. The girl rushed forward, her claws shaking. She touched the human's bleeding arm clumsily, her eyes wide with fear. "Hurt," she whispered. He gave a tired smile. "I'm fine," he said softly, though his face was pale. He sank down onto the floor, wiping sweat from his brow. The girl knelt beside him, pressing the blanket against his wound. Her eyes shone with something new. Not fear, not distrust, but gratitude. Her voice trembled as she whispered a word in her own tongue that meant protector. The human didn't understand, but he felt the weight of her voice. He placed his hand over hers, steady and warm. That night, the girl didn't curl alone in the corner. She sat close to him, clutching the blanket they shared. Her first faint smile had grown into something deeper. She had seen him fight not for money, not for power, but for her. But outside, the city's whispers had turned into rumors, and far away, the master of the slavers had already heard of his men's failure. The real storm was coming. The warehouse was quiet again, but the silence was heavy. The human sat against the wall, his arm wrapped in cloth that the girl had tied. His breath was slow, steady, though his body ached from the fight. The pipe lay beside him, bent from the blows. The girl sat close, her glowing eyes fixed on him. She still trembled from the memory of chains, from the sight of slavers reaching for her. But when she looked at the man beside her, a strange warmth replaced the fear. She whispered softly, almost afraid to say it. "Safe." The human looked at her, his tired face softening. He nodded. "Yes, you're safe." She didn't understand every word, but she caught the tone. It was steady. It was true. For the first time in years, she leaned her head against another person's shoulder. At first, her claws shook, expecting him to push her away. But he didn't. He sat still, letting her lean, letting her breathe without fear. Morning came, and with it, whispers outside the warehouse. People had heard of the fight. Some said the human was a fool for protecting a stray alien. Others said he was dangerous for crossing the slavers. No one dared come close, but their voices filled the streets. The human ignored them. He had no time for whispers. His only focus was the girl. He knew the slavers would return, stronger, with more chains. He had no great weapons, no army. But he had made a promise, and he would not break it. He gave her food again, the last of his coins spent on bread and water. She ate slowly, her eyes never leaving him. For the first time, she didn't hide her hunger or her weakness. She let him see her as she truly was. That night she spoke more, her words broken but full of meaning. She told him in fragments about her family, about the songs they sang before the slavers came. Her voice cracked, but she sang one small line. The sound was soft, trembling, but pure. The human listened. He didn't understand the words, but the melody carried sorrow and beauty. It filled the empty warehouse like light in darkness. When she finished, her eyes were wet. She whispered one word, "Home." He swallowed hard. His chest tightened. He looked at her and said quietly, "We'll make a home." She didn't know the sentence, but she understood the way he said it, the way he looked at her. It wasn't a lie. The days passed, the slavers searched, but the human moved carefully. He found small corners, old buildings, places forgotten by most. Each night he gave her food. Each morning he taught her words. Slowly her voice grew stronger. One evening she surprised him. She pointed at him and said clearly, "Protector?" He froze, the word striking deep. She smiled faintly, not shy this time. The first real smile she had given since her life had been torn apart. It was small, but it changed everything. That night, as stars filled the sky, she curled beside him under the blanket. Her claws no longer clutched it as if someone might steal it. Instead, she shared it, pulling part of it over him too. He looked at her, startled, and she whispered in her tongue, a word that meant family. He didn't know the language, but he felt it. He placed his hand gently on her head. "Family," he repeated. She tilted her head, then gave a slow nod. The human knew the world outside was cruel. He knew the slavers would return and the fight was not over, but he also knew something else. He was no longer alone, and neither was she. One man and one alien girl, broken by life but bound by kindness. They had nothing, no riches, no army, no power. Only food shared, wounds bandaged, and a promise made in the dark. And sometimes, that was enough. The galaxy would call him a fool, but in her glowing eyes, he saw the truth. She didn't see a fool. She saw the first person who had chosen her. Not as property, not as a burden, but as someone worth protecting. As the night deepened, she whispered one last word in his language, her voice soft but sure, "Home." The human closed his eyes, his hand still resting on hers. For the first time in a long time, he believed it too.